Today, I am doing one of my favorite things to do, which is reorganizing my bookshelf, my home library. Something that, unfortunately, I don't get to do as often as I want to do it. Well, it's also a lot of work, but it is a very, very fun thing to do for me. So I'm going to be taking you through the process. As you can see, all the books are on the floor behind me. I don't know if you can see, and there's a empty bookshelf right behind me that we're going to be filling today. I'm going to take you through that process of reorganizing, and I will also be sharing my slightly chaotic system for keeping everything organized. And I will tag on a little bookshelf tour of some of the things that I've collected over the years. So yes, grab a cup of tea, a little drink, whatever you want, and let's get started. For ease, I am borrowing my sewing table, and I'm going to organize the books up here because I don't want to keep bending on the floor and then picking the book back up. So I'm going to be organizing here. This is going to be really, really helpful in helping me get this done. The real question is, will I be able to do all of this today? Can all this be done today? And I truly don't know, but we're going to find out. I've already done a couple of things. I've put up the non-book items, like the decor items, on the shelf, and also I filled out the bottom shelves with the things that I typically put on the bottom shelf, like painting supplies, things that aren't all like entirely book-centered, you know, things like games, puzzles, things I usually like play around with in the house. So those things are already up on the shelf. So I feel like a good amount of the work is done. I also had the fun idea to make the bookshelf two-toned. I had been toying around with the idea for a while, but I wasn't really sure if I wanted to commit to it. But then I'm like, you know what? You only live once. If I don't like the look of the two-tone bookshelf situation, then I can just change it back. The bookshelves themselves are white. They are white Billy bookcases, but I wanted to get inserts that were brown in color, but IKEA doesn't sell the mix. It was either I buy the whole brown shelf or I buy the whole white shelf. So what I did was I got the regular white shelves, and then I wrapped the inserts, the extra shelvings, with brown wallpaper, like wood-like wallpaper. Maple wood, I think, is what I ended up getting. So yeah, I love the look so much. This was exactly, well, I don't know what look I was going for, but I got it. So I'm officially out of tea, and I'm ready to go. I am truly having the best time doing this, and at the same time I am exhausted, but I have to finish today. I can't imagine letting this go into tomorrow, so I'm taking a tea break. Which I shouldn't be drinking tea because it's so hot outside, but tea is what I want, so I'm drinking tea. I'm trying not to sweat. It's a lot, but it is, yeah, nice. It is fun. I always forget just how many books I have, so every time I'm doing this, which is like, I don't know, once a year. I haven't done this since early last year, so like in the past 15 months, but I always forget every time I have to do that. Oh, I've gotten a couple more books since then, but I'm gonna wrap this up, get all the books on the shelf, and I can make on my promise and give you that tour that I said I was going to. I thought that with the new bigger shelves that I was making a ton of space and that all the books that were on the floor were going to fit. But boy, was I wrong. And it's not all that surprising. There were a lot of books on the floor, but I was being optimistic. I was being hopeful, thinking that they would all fit. A huge chunk of them fit, but yeah, no. Although the good thing is these new shelves have a lot of depth. There's so much space behind that in some of these sections, there are actually books behind the books that you can see. So all in all, we made progress. And we've also really gotten used to having books strewn around the apartment. So it's not really a big deal. We leaned into the eclectic style of the apartment a long time ago, and I don't mind it. I also like the look of keeping things neat but a little messy. That's kind of where I'm at with that. But I made good progress. I love the way it looks. I love the new bookshelves. I think that I made the right decision for myself, at least for now. Feels good. I feel good. So I'm going to do a bit of a bookshelf tour, not calling out every single book, because that would literally be impossible, but talking a bit about some of my favorite sections or some of my favorite books within each section of the bookshelf, and like kind of go over how I organize my books a bit, and talking about some of the books that have helped shape me as an adult and as a reader. I am a self-proclaimed eclectic reader. I don't think there is a genre that I absolutely won't read if I was convinced I was a good enough book. I love to read all types of books, but the romance genre is probably my most extensive genre. I read a lot of romance books. I just love it. Whether it's a romance with a happily ever after, I love a HEA, but I also love a book that will, wreck you a little. Someone dies. That's not something that doesn't necessarily, even if they don't end up together in the end. I love a romance-infused book in all forms. So while I will read a lot of different genres, and I do, you will always find me. I would always gravitate towards a book with some sort of romance in it first, whether it's historical romances, which I have a lot of, or the more contemporary romances that on my shelf are in the same spot as contemporary women's fiction. I love those books as well. And sometimes when there's some overlap between a book that has romance in it but is just contemporary women's fiction where the focus isn't necessarily on the romance, like a woman-centered book, those are some of my favorite books to read. And I do love fantasy, but I wouldn't consider myself like a full hardcore fantasy reader. I think I lean more toward the fairy tale type of fantasy, unless those, I don't know what they're called, the books with the multiple storylines where it's building up to this like large world building thing. I don't do a lot of that type of fantasy. I'm more, like romantasy. Like I said, if it's a romance infused book, I'm sold. I'm usually sold. And then there are the old books and the classics, some of which I've had for a really long time. We're talking over a decade and a half. And you can tell because I've had these ones. I've had them since I was a child. And there's a lot of wear and tear on the books. You can just, because when I was younger, I didn't have a huge book collection. So I used to have no choice but to reread some of the books that I had then. And these are some of the ones that I've had for a really long time. This is a really good play by Olarotimi called The Gods Are Not to Blame. And it is a Nigerian retelling of the tale of Oedipus. It's really good. Really, really good. And while we're on the subject of old books and classics, there are two books that I read as a child that turned me into a reader. Those are books that were so formative that I read before I was even 10 years old that I'm like, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Like, this is so much fun. And those two books are Chike and the River by Chinua Achebe and The Secret Door by Enid Blyton. I hope I'm pronouncing her. I've actually never heard the name pronounced like outside of like when I pronounce it. So Enid Blyton. Yes. And I couldn't tell you just how many times I read and reread these books when I was younger. And a third book called Ifeanyi Enubi, but I don't have the copy that I had when I was a child because it got lost somewhere along the line. I think my parents threw it away or something or gave it out. But these two books I remember vividly reading over and over again. They are both adventure type books. This one by Chinua Achebe, which I don't think this is one of his popular works because he's known more for Things Fall Apart and No Longer at Ease and The Arrow of God and that trilogy. But this is one of my favorite books of his because of the age I was when he gripped me, I think. I don't know if it has anything to do with the quality of the book. It's probably not his best book, I don't know. But it follows a boy who lives in Niger Delta who his entire life has wanted to go to Asaba, the city in Delta State at the time. And you follow him on that journey. It's just him gathering everything that he has so that he can afford to pay for the ferry ride. And then he gets on the ferry and he gets to the city and he kind of gets lost. So there's adventure in it. You get a little scared for him. He's getting to know himself. He meets a bunch of rambunctious, that's the only word I can use to describe, really sketchy characters on his journey. And I just remember having so much fun reading this book. It was such a good intro, I think, as a child, getting into the world of reading, like just for fun, not reading to get anything out of it, just reading for vibes. It was a really, really good introduction to that for me. And the second one, I remember I read in the summer of like, I think my last year in primary school. So I must have been like 9 or 10 or something like that. But it's an anthology. So it's not just one story, it's A Secret Door and other stories. But it's 3 kids. I think 2 of them are siblings and the third is a cousin. But they were feeling very sad about the fact that they had been sent to live with a distant aunt who lives in an old house that they really weren't looking forward to spending their summer in her house. It was very like Chronicles of Narnia, but they didn't really have a choice because that's where their parents put them, and they're stuck in this old house looking for things to do, just twiddling their thumbs the entire summer. And the house happens to be one of those huge old houses that has a lot of hidden rooms and nooks and crannies and big bookshelves and hidden things and secret doors. So they find a secret door that takes them into a world of adventure. That's the most that I would say. But yeah, it was so much fun having that experience. I do remember like I finished reading this book and I didn't know that feeling when I was younger, because like when you're younger, you're just kind of living. But I do remember finishing these books and just being like, whatever that feeling is, give me more. I want more and more and more of it. So these were the 2 books that turned me into a reader, that converted me into a reader. And then a couple of years later, before I became an adult, somewhere in my older teen years, I read The Velveteen Rabbit and it just hooked me. And it's a children's book, but I also have a collection of children's books. I find children's books to be magical. And so I lean into them sometimes when I want that kind of energy. It helps to be a little playful sometimes. I don't know if this is something that all adults do or all adults can benefit from, but there are some children's books I found are not just helpful for kids, but for adults. They also help you decompress. You know, sometimes I think we can get carried away with life a little too much, and that can be especially daunting, especially when you're creative or a budding creative. If you're starting your creative journey, I think children's books are some of the easiest ways. They're so small, people consider them to be so silly, but they are some of the easiest ways to get a little bit of that shine, a little bit of that magic back, because you're just enjoying the art just for the art, you know? But you also learn a lesson. I think if it's something that you haven't tried, you might want to look into. Same with the coloring books. Love them. And just off to the side here in the living room is another small book section where I put all my non-fiction books on creativity, self-discovery, a little bit of self-help, how to manage your finances, and some books that I think fall in the creative non-fiction books. They're not quite fiction, but they're not non-fiction as well. Memoirs. I love reading good memoirs, mostly for people that I admire or care about. I don't think I've ever picked up a memoir of someone whose life I wasn't really curious about. It helps me in my mind to keep those books separate from the books that are on the shelf. But also because I have the space. There are also smaller sections of books like mythology that I really love. These are books that are kind of like, they're mostly fiction, really, but you learn so much. I love books that teach me things, or that, you know, I think like help take care of both my mind and my soul. So the mythology section is one of those. But then there's also the poetry section. These are books on poetry. These are some books that I really loved. There are some up here too. Some books on poetry, or like small books that just contain like notes on certain subjects, like notes on grief, notes on love, notes on romance, what it means to grow, what it means to take care of yourself, what it means to adult, you know, things like that. But the point is, I'm learning something. Those are books that I also love. And the sections that I call the heavy section. The books in this section are so heavy, but they are books about particular works of art that I love. And a book that is based on a particular work of art, like a show or something, if they make it into a book, I will be reading that book, because the things like these books kind of combine some of my favorite things. I love media. I learn a lot from media. I'm a huge TV, pop culture girly. I have been since I was younger. I enjoy it more than life itself. So when it comes to like really huge pieces of media that I love, I don't just love the work of art in itself. I love finding out the processes that led to the making of that work of art, and all the different people, you know, that contributed to the final product that we get to enjoy. Sometimes it's because I love the project so much. Sometimes it's because I love or admire the person who made the work and want to like get a glimpse into how their mind works. And other times it's really just about reading about art and creativity and how it impacts the world around us and how we are changed by it, or how like we interpret different works of art. Yeah. Seems interesting. It's interesting to me. It's books, so we could be here all day with me yapping. But yeah, that is the bookshelf tour, sort of. I feel compelled to add that this is years in the making. I know people who have a lot more books than I do. It's not really about that. I also know people who are chronic book readers, like who books are their lives, but don't necessarily have a collection as large as I do. Even though my collection is only big or small compared to someone else, that really isn't the point of this. The common thread, the thing that I prefer to focus on, is the fact that we are reading. That's really what matters. Whether or not you like to collect your books or you want to collect your books but you can't collect your books, it really isn't the point. That's just a fun, like, added bonus thing. The good thing is that you're reading. And I always want to be reminded of that, because having a book collection, if that's not something that you love, isn't something that you should do just because like someone else is doing it. But yeah, I just felt the need to add that and say that I've had the most fun making this video. This is one of my favorite things. The only thing I would have more fun talking about than books are, I don't know, TV shows, maybe something like that. But yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for joining me. If you want to know more about books, I don't really know what else there is to talk about, but I'm sure I will think of something. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me know what you think in the comment section of this video. If you have a favorite book, I would love to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Yes, I've said all the things. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye.